I'm walking with the Word in Sheffield, and I've been thinking about Timothy. Timothy was a young leader in the early church, and the Apostle Paul really loved Timothy. He respected him, and he had what we might in the modern church call a discipling relationship with Timothy. He gave him advice, he gave him encouragement, and he looked out for him. And it's really interesting because Paul does this in person, but he also does it through letters. And perhaps a modern equivalent would be emails, Facebook, text messages. But if you're drawing alongside a young person in your church and you're discipling them, think about the different ways that you can feed into their lives. And in one of Paul's letters, 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12, Paul says this to Timothy. He says, "Let no one despise you because of your youth, but rather be an example to the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." What does he mean by let no one despise you because of your youth? I think Paul is saying don't let people look down on you just because you're young. Sometimes we can make the mistake of assuming that young people in our churches have less wisdom and less knowledge about God than us. But actually, wisdom and knowledge of God don't come through age. They come through intimacy and relationship with God and making ourselves open and vulnerable to Him. And I believe that some of the best insights and the most worthwhile things in our churches may come from the young people. They're not the future of the church. They're the present of the church. They are the churches today, and we need to regard them as active parts of our church. Remember how much Jesus welcomed little children and said, "The kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." In other words, we should be learning from the young people in our churches. And Paul had this attitude when he said, "Don't let anyone despise you or look down on you because of your youth." He recognized that Timothy is a gifted young man and is someone who's worth listening to. And he gives Timothy a piece of leadership advice, which I think is really powerful. He says, be an example to the believers. He's calling Timothy to lead by example. So everything that Timothy wants to encourage the church to be, he needs to be himself. He says, be an example to the believers in conduct, in speech, in love, in faith, in purity. That's a pretty comprehensive list. Every part of Timothy's life is meant to be an example to the believers in the church. His words, the things he does, his faith in God, his love for other people, his love for God, and his moral purity are all meant to be an example to the believers. So if you're a leader in church, think about this concept of leading by example. And if there are young people in your church, remember to take time to listen to them. They've got valuable contributions as well.